There are lots of religions in the world, especially today. Probably the two mostly followed ones are Christian and Islam. We're just going to look at a few here, a couple here. So, obviously, you look at Christianity, which started in Judea. The core of Christianity is from the Bible, the Holy Bible, which is from the Greek word biblio, which actually means holy books. So the Bible is actually a collection of ideas, philosophies, parables, and some historical references. Although the historical references are of interest, obviously there's lots of excavations and archaeology in the Holy Land and elsewhere to try and collaborate things written in the Bible. Obviously, we could do a podcast on its own on that one. Obviously, the Bible is a collection of, say, documents, let's call them that, and texts written by individuals, which, if you are a Christian, you believe are divinely inspired. It's not necessarily a man writing these on his own. He has inspiration from, if you like, a supernatural force. A lot of these texts were written from what we call oral tradition, which is obviously word of mouth. Stories were told, especially probably a lot in the Old Testament. The Jews would tell stories, handed down. Eventually, somebody recorded them, and because the Jews became a divided people over many, many years, the Assyrians invaded them, the Babylonians invaded them and deliberately segregated the Jews. So the Jews didn't have one nation for many, many years. Probably the most understood language in the region at the time was Greek. So many of the texts were translated from Hebrew to Greek, which, we can argue actually created a lot of misunderstanding and mistranslation work done on them. So obviously, even today, they're still trying to find some meaning in some things. Obviously, when we talk about Christianity, it does have its roots in Judaism. It's unavoidable. Many of us have had a Christian upbringing. I went to a Catholic school. We effectively learned about Judaism at some point. So obviously, but at some point, obviously within the first 100 years, from 4 BC to 100 AD, there was a split of Christianity from Judaism. Happened quite quickly. Obviously, a lot of the original Christians developed in individual cults. So again, they had their own ideas, own interpretations of things. So, which always makes it quite interesting. Well, eventually, some people decided to actually collect all these writings and texts together into one Bible, as it were. Again, which is actually quite interesting, because now today, obviously, there's two main branches of Christianity. There are others. One is obviously the Catholic faith, and the other one is Protestant. What is interesting is that both faiths, except there are 27 books in the New Testament. When it comes to the Old Testament, Catholics have 46 books and the Protestants have 39. Although, interestingly, in more recent times, the Protestant publishers of the Bible are including the 7 books towards the back as an appendix. So, which is, again, yeah, it's an interesting move by the Protestant faith. It's interesting how the Christian split actually happened. Obviously, there was a guy called Martin Luther, who at some point became an Augustine monk. This came about because he had a fear of thunder, apparently, and he was riding his horse or out and about, and he got so fearful of the storm that he prayed to Our Lady that he would enter the church if he was saved. Yeah, so that's what he did. He survived the storm and so entered into a holy life. Yeah, I mean, Martin Luther became very disillusioned with the Catholic Church at the time. People were able to pay for forgiveness, indulgences, etc., money-making scams. Possibly there was quite a bit of corruption. Even as a Catholic, I was taught this at school, because we have to be aware with our own selves, our own brethren, what is going on. So obviously, the church needed to make money. You could pay for things like prayers for all time. So if you died, you could pay for the Catholic Church to keep praying for your soul. There were lots of other things as well. And obviously, individual priests may have been benefiting from different charities given to them. I mean, obviously, if you are now leading on to the next thing, obviously, this caused a split. Martin Luther went off and formed another faith, religion. Not directly, but he nailed his proclamation on a church door, which says what he felt was wrong. Lots of people consider this to be a big revelation. To be quite honest, this was happening a lot. People would often nail proclamations onto church doors for others to read. It was like a form of, I suppose we could say, almost like a form of social media now. You put your ideas down, whether or not the local cleric would come outside, priest would come out and have a read of it, put it down or leave it. But yeah, there was freedom of expression, if you like. It wasn't totally shut off. Obviously, lots of reasons why the church at the time, the Catholic Church, liked to have a grip on everything, which included education, lands, money, even politics, probably. So again, it's rather interesting the way that the Protestant faith has developed, certainly in the UK or in England, where it's the official religion of the King and possibly of Parliament as well. But obviously, when you are a Christian, you believe that Christ is the Messiah, the Son of God. The big division will be how Catholics do tend to revere Mary, Mother of God, more than Protestants do. It's not that the Protestants don't believe, well, I understand it, that Jesus was there divinely, put there in a womb divinely. It's more about the Catholics. We do actually look at Our Lady probably on the same level as Jesus in many ways. She can intercede for us, where probably the Protestant faith doesn't necessarily accept that. There might be somebody who would disagree with me there. Please write that down. I mean, again, there's always going to be an interpretation of ideas. Now, it's rather interesting when I say Christ is the Messiah. Another religion that does accept Christ or Jesus is Islam, but not necessarily as the Son of God, but as a prophet. When we look at Islam, it is actually from the writings of Muhammad, obviously. He had the mysteries or the information or the revelations revealed to him by Gabriel, who is actually an angel, recognized in Christianity as well. This was in 622 AD. I mean, the actual name Muhammad does actually mean commendable. There's lots of things on the internet about Muhammad at the moment. Obviously, we're not all Islamic or Christian scholars. I prefer to go back to books written 20 or 30 years ago, personally, to get my information from, rather than read what's currently on the internet. But it's a rather interesting thing to study at the moment. I do like to look at other people's religions to understand where they're coming from, because I think we have a lot more in common, certainly with major religions, than we have disagreements. And I believe this is what we should be looking for. So obviously you can see, because Islam does actually have references in the Quran, which literally does mean book. The term Quran does that literally mean book. The book does feature Jesus, Moses, Noah, Mary, some quite strong Jewish traditions as well. Probably a bit controversial to say that in some ways, but it's true. It's there. I have actually seen some clerics from Islam who've actually acknowledged that as well. I do think that one of the major differences between Christianity and Islam is, Christianity, we tend to feel within ourselves when we've done something wrong. And we do feel, we know right from wrong, or we should do. But there's no real punishment or guaranteed punishment. Probably Islam is a lot stricter with regards to this. Certainly there are rules about an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, cut the hand off for thieves, which is something that if a country wants to operate like that, so be it in its law. Maybe when we're talking about Christianity, we're probably talking about, as a Catholic, I can go to confession. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm totally forgiven for anything. What it means is I've acknowledged I've made a mistake and we'll try and do better in future in many ways. That's a very base level. I probably have Catholics saying that's not quite true. It is. We also have a fear of purgatory, how long we spend between getting to heaven when we die, and other factors as well. We know when we've done wrong. And I think when you actually look at the laws of Moses, the 10 Commandments, which I think feed into Islam as well at some point, 8 of the 10 Commandments are the basis of an ideal society. Whatever you believe about your faith in God, etc. Certainly 8 of them: not stealing, not committing adultery. I know easily said and done. Lots of the others, I'm not going to list them all here, are what we should try and aspire to. I'm just going to look at one more religion, just out of interest, and one I do have a certain thing about. And this is the Nordic traditions, the Vikings, if you like. There is a belief that the Nordic tradition, that the Nordic faith is older than Christianity. It's not directly true. The Viking faith as we know it, if you like, developed as a system in about the 8th or 9th century AD. Certainly the Germanic base for it developed probably 2,000 years beforehand. So the actual, what we understand is the Viking faiths, are still relatively contemporary with Christianity. But we still have traditions that come through, like Thor, who is the god of thunder, is Thursday. And obviously, anyone who knows Marvel, DC, Marvel characters will know about Thor. Odin was the head god. We all know about that, although Odin actually directly means fury, from what I've reading scholarly from the Nordic words. Freya is love. Frigg was a woman, is the wife of Odin, where we got our word Friday from. She was also about love and relationships. And then we got Loki, whom we all got a bit of affection for one way or another. He was just about mischief. Not quite the Christian devil, I don't think. Not totally evil, but yes, certainly questionable. Again, the Nordic separation of Nordic gods, a god for every occasion almost. That's not about presidents. Came from the Greeks, had many gods for different things. The Romans did. The idea of one god is probably has more of a connection with Judaism, obviously, than it does with more traditional gods around predating and around the time. The Egyptians had many, many gods for different things. Okay, but yes. Now I'm going to open for a question to Steve as a starter. What is faith, and why do you think people want to have a faith? Is my question. So, over to you, Steve.
Okay, right. That's a kind of worms to open.
Yeah.
I was noting things down as you were talking,
Yeah.
just so as I wouldn't forget them. First of all, the Bible is it's in its current form. It has 66 books, apparently.
Yeah.
Or chapters, or whatever you like to call them, documents. And it was translated initially from cuneiform. It's called cuneiform. It's a type of writing. The art of writing was invented between 3,000 and 4,000 BC. So we talk about 5,000-6,000 years ago.
Yes.
And we started off with small markings, which was a sort of pre-writing.
Yeah.
In the book of John, in the Gospel according to John, in the New Testament, he says, "In the beginning was the Word."
Yeah.
And I think that's when writing was invented. He said the Word was God. He basically meant to say the Word was truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so we go through through the little markings where people understood to the hieroglyphs, which were around about a few thousand years before Christ, and they had their gods. So just to add that into the mix, and then they were changed into Greek.
Yeah.
You had various languages. You had Arabic. You had Aramaic. Aramaic.
Yeah.
And then they put them into Greek, and then into Latin, and then into the devised language. This is the books of the Bible, right?
Yeah.
The original books in the Bible, I'm sure that you'll find them in Egypt or in the Vatican Library somewhere.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
The Jewish book, the
Torah,
is basically more or less the Old Testament. What happened is that religion, it sprung up through personalities. So in the case of Christianism, it's Christ.
Yeah.
Jesus was around, and so all that was noted only after his crucifixion.
Yeah.
When the New Testament was written. If you look at the Bible and the New Testament, the Bible is all about God.
Yeah.
And the New Testament is all about Jesus.
Yeah, it's the old traditions as well.
And the same, I've not read, although I've not read it, I assume that the book of the Muslim book of faith is the same. You know, that they only started diverting away when their prophet Muhammad, when he became this personage, his personality, he made his rules, and that the people, he said you should live like this, like this, like this.
Yeah.
And so you had these splinter groups, and
Yes.
and you know, the Christians, they followed their personality. The Muslims, they followed their person, and the Jewish people, they didn't believe any of the personalities, which is probably why everybody's been hating the Jews for all this time.
Well, yes,
you know what I mean? I'm talking about the faith. Sorry, the faith.
Yeah,
the faith.
yeah.
You were talking about the Vikings. Yes, I can understand. You said that it was around about 200 or 300 years after, in the centuries 200 or 300, when the Viking god was announced. He's probably announced before then.
Yeah,
but it's when it was noted down. Remember, when people could write and when were recorded. And Lodin, the mischievous one, I'm sure he was just a cheeky chappy. Just to keep the humour in the.
There were sagas. Yeah, there were sagas. Right. Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Right. So that's basically making some comments of what you. I think the fragmentation of the Christian faith between the Catholics and the Protestants, just so that a king he could divorce. I'm not sure if that was, a very theological excuse enough to separate them. But as we're coming down from then to here, we find that other faiths, Christian faiths, are splintering off because some say you can't have sex before marriage, some say that you can, some say same-sex marriage, some say that and so they splinter off and become more liberal and more liberal and more liberal. And now we have you had the charismatics recent here in Brazil and your Billy Grahams in the US.
And
it was just like a watery down theology for the masses. And when people thought they could make money by doing this, they'd start their own. If you leave here, where I am here in home, and you walk to the academy where I do the academy with my son. You go past 4 or 5 or 6 little temples, should we say? Of different denominations. With each one has 5 or 6 people in there, and one preacher who shouts his head off. At each group. Well, that's because the preacher thinks he can make some dosh there, because you got the tithing. Don't forget the tithing. So the religion is a money making. It's always been a money making scheme ever since the Catholics. Which is why the Catholics were against so many different religious sects and different entities, because they didn't want their. If you go to the Crusades, the Crusaders, the Catholics, they were against the Crusaders because they were taking the money from the kings, and the money wasn't going to the Catholic Church. If you want brutality, in religion, go and have a look at the Catholic religion.
Well,
it's very, very brutal.
Well, very brutal. It's Pope Urban.
Even recently, the nuns would make somebody kneel on dried corn. If they were naughty at school, and they'd be flogged and things like this. And so, brutal. And they kill people.
Well, okay,
what's that got to do with faith and spirituality?
Well, okay,
let's go. To me, faith is following a certain religion. That to me is not spirituality. Following a faith, all the faiths, they all lead to one final destination. Doesn't matter which faith you follow. Doesn't matter. They all reach the same destination, which is that entity which we all call God. And we all try and reach God. We all want to be in God's good books, except for the atheists that don't believe that there is a God.
Well, yeah.
But all spiritually minded people, they all want to be keeping God's book, but they all, because they belong to different faiths, they're all walking a different path to reach there. Even the Hindus, who've got several gods, and the Buddhists, they've got several gods. It's a God, but it's a God, and they will do whatever they have to do to oblige the God.
Yeah.
And so, that's a difference between spirituality, is believing that there is a higher entity, there's a higher God, a higher supreme being, and the rest are like departments, ways of reaching this entity. Oh, a little bit.
Yes, I get where this is going. Yes,
strange there, but
yes,
anyway, to reach their God, and so the religions have all got the problems.
Yeah, of course.
There's not one true religion that does not abide by all the 10 Commandments.
Right.
There is not one. However, and the 10 Commandments at the end of the day was adopted by the Christians in the Old Testament.
Yeah, I mean, Moses.
So those if you look at the ancient Egyptian texts and hieroglyphs, their gods had very similar happenings, occurrences, than what the gods did, what the God and the personalities did in the Bible. So the three in one, it comes from the Egyptian hieroglyphs. It's also seen in Hinduism. It's also seen in the Christian faith. I don't know if it's seen in the Muslim faith. I really don't know that much, to be honest. I really don't know. I've not profoundly looked into that. But,
well, it's I mean that can be.
I'm frightened to rip the book. You see.
Well,
there a page.
I know. I've got a Bible that fell apart somewhere here. But no, I dropped it one day. I dropped one on the floor one day, and but it's I mean, I'm not going to, as a Catholic, I'm not going to stand here. I'll sit here and defend everything the Catholic Church has done, and I alluded to that in my preamble. Okay. Even in probably the 1950s and probably 60s, some of the educational techniques implied by certain sects.
Go back further than that.
I'm thinking.
Burning people at the stake, man. If you were a non-believer, you were put in the you were pillaged.
The
stocks and burnt at the stake.
Now, this is what happened to the Protestantism between Catholics and Protestants. They both killed. At one point, you've got Bloody Mary in obviously Henry VIII's daughters. Bloody Mary killed.
Heresy.
Yeah. They burned at the stake for having the wrong faith.
You spoke bad about Christ. That's it.
It wasn't that. It was an interpretation. 400 Protestants were burned by Bloody Mary. In Queen Elizabeth's reign, 400 were burnt then. Roughly. I mean, not as a competition, of course. I mean, Henry VIII was...
And that was just the famous ones. The average Joe.
Okay, we've got Henry VIII. Henry VIII always... I think Henry VIII always said he'd still died a Catholic. He was just head of the church in England. Obviously, So, I mean, it's a little bit more complicated with Henry VIII because he actually married his brother's widow, which is against the Old Testament. And then he had to ask for a papal, what do they call them? I've forgotten the term now, but a
pardon. A pardon?
Pardon. It's not a pardon. It's to go against the rules. I really love this woman and all that. And again, what's it? And then, of course, he divorced her when we saw Anne Boleyn, the bit of Essex girl Nookie. Again,
Killed her.
Yeah, killed her. He didn't kill his first wife. Mind you, that could have ramifications. And I think it was more about, I think he still felt affection for his first wife. But obviously, and yeah, Mary was her daughter, and Mary became queen. Quite a strong woman. I mean, everyone calls her Bloody Mary. She was reacting probably to things at the time around her, and extreme, as you say, faith. You know, you can't have these people saying something different. The ultimate form of cancellation, probably. Yeah.
They say there's a little poem about Henry VIII's wives.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah.
And they say divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived.
Yeah, I think
you just got to fit the names to the names to the position of them.
Yeah, I think there's some doctrine that he actually was only married twice, because the others weren't legal. Wrangle that the others weren't legal.
They might not have been in the eyes of God, in the eyes of the church.
Well, I mean, this was it. You know, the complicity of the church with him. How easily? I mean, don't forget there was a power struggle still with the Pope across Europe, and if you like, a lot of the royal families across Europe, they just they needed Pope support because they did see it as divinely there. But yeah, I mean, it's going. You look at history. So there's Henry VIII. Later, when we talk about the Crusades, we then talk about the Knights Templar, who invented the modern banking system, as we know, not the modern banking, the banking system as we know it. Obviously, they suffered a fate because they'll get more powerful than the king. When you study it, there's no way they were into a cult, not directly into occultist religions with heads or anything else, worshipping heads. They were still religious people. They were still holy monks, or monks with swords, would be the best description of them.
Well, I believe they were crusaders. They were crusaders.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
with another name.
Yeah, I mean, well, they were security. They were paid security. Yeah. But again, they suffered a fate of all sorts of things, partly because they were wealth and money, and the king owed them money, and he didn't want to pay it back, and they